take you live now to Cape Town. The Finance Minister Tito Mboweni has the unenviable task tomorrow of convincing South Africans that the economy can be revived. Here's the context: weak growth, ballooning debt and cash-guzzling state-owned enterprises expected to feature strongly when he delivers the 2020 budget. ENCA's Devon Morgan is in Cape Town ahead of that speech tomorrow. Some pundits saying, Devon, it's the most important budget in the past 25 years. As we look ahead to tomorrow, you're also going to give us a quick personal finance perspective.
Yeah, you're quite right. It's always an important budget, Jeremy, but there are peculiar circumstances this time around. I mean, we've heard the same type of challenges in the last budget, in the 2019 address on the economy. Here's a difference, though. Things are much more severe. We've got growth that's not producing the type of economic activity to generate taxes that we need to run our social services. We've missed tax targets for the past 8 years. So we're at a Nedbank event here that is launching a look at some postgraduates and graduates' take on the economy and what should happen. More on that in a moment, but let's get to the part that you mentioned now about personal finance. I'm going to bring in from Nedbank Dr. Rufaro Mocheka. She's a personal finance expert before I get into a student. In some ways, what's happening on the macro level with this economy shares some great similarities on what could take place on the micro level. Because if things get tight on the government level in terms of finances, it's going to affect the consumer.
Yes, I totally agree with you there. What's happening on the micro level in South Africa at this point in time is the government is not collecting enough income to be able to pay for the expenses that we incur. And in that case, what we are sitting with is a situation where the government is now borrowing money to be able to fund all the expenses that it incurs.
All right, so in that regard, what the finance minister has to do, he's got two major options. One, cut spending, or the other very fearful one from a consumer perspective is raise taxes. How much of a reality do you think we're going to be hit with tomorrow if those really driving taxes go up? And which ones do you think are most likely to feel the pinch?
I think the minister is in dilemma.
Yeah.
Because if you look at cutting expenses, I know that especially from the budget last year, he spoke about maybe providing enough money for people to take retirement, maybe early retirement. And I'm not sure how many of those people have taken up that option. I'm not sure what other options he has in terms of cutting expenses. But when it comes to income, he might consider maybe increasing the VAT. And I know that I think to a South African who has been hard hit, especially recently because of the economic situation, it's very difficult for them to be able to really accommodate for any other taxes. But if you look at it from a VAT perspective, for me, I personally think with personal finances, I think they contribute about 38% of the economy at this point in time in terms of the revenues. And if you look at corporate tax, it's about 20%. And then the next one, which is VAT, I think it's about 24%. Yeah. So if you look at corporate tax, why it's tough is because some of the peer countries on the continent, like your Nigeria, even Rwanda, their corporate tax is much lower. So it means indirectly you might chase away investors in that regard. And if you look at personal tax, it's already the largest at this point in time. So the only way, from my view, is VAT. Even though from last year, recently, it was increased again. But VAT, if you look at VAT, why it's more important is because it's a broader base. And maybe one might also need to consider some of those zero-rated products as well to be able to make the consumer feel a bit better.
Yeah. So, Dr. Rufaro, you do see some pinch for the consumer. That most likely might be a scenario that we could see increased. I'm going to ask you to step aside for a moment there, Doctor. Thanks very much for your time. Rosalia Patha, you are a finalist in this competition that's currently being launched here tonight, where we are trying to get inclusivity on commentary on the budget. You've submitted your views either on the budget or just the general state of the economy. What's your take on what's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as Dr. Rufaro said, we're most likely to see some sort of tax increase. I think we're going to get clearer plan on how the government plans on approaching restructuring Eskom and what impact that will have on the budget, as well as more information on some of the topics mentioned in the State of the Nation address, like the Sovereign Wealth Fund and the State Bank. So I think that hopefully Minister Mboweni will really elucidate a number of the topics the President introduced earlier.
You know, from a university perspective, a youth perspective, I mean, you've got the fees must fall scenario that's been hanging over government for a long, long time. It's got to do with education. There are plenty of more youth issues that's hovering there. Do you think platforms like these, or probably more extensive than this, gives the opportunity for youth to have a bigger voice in what happens with government finances?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the beauty of this competition is not just that we students get the opportunity to meet the top economic minds in the country, but we also get to meet each other. You know, we get to meet people from different universities, exchange perspectives. I've probably heard, 10 or 11 different perspectives to mine. So I think this competition really creates a sort of crucible of knowledge for young economic minds.
From a university student perspective, what's probably the most important thing that the finance minister should mention tomorrow?
I think youth unemployment. We're sitting in a position where over half of our youth are unemployed, and for me as a young person, that's deeply worrying.
Thanks very much indeed. Rashalia Patha there. Indeed, 29% or thereabout, Jeremy, youth unemployment. It's one of the huge problems, apart from anemic growth, apart from low business and consumer confidence, that has to surface when the minister takes the podium tomorrow.
Now, Devon, a good barometer of what we're likely to hear tomorrow would obviously be the markets. We know that locally and globally, markets have been under pressure.